Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Great to have you along. And a quick reminder, this episode is brought to you by the HR Business Accelerator, which offers fractional and outsourced HR marketing services such as thought leadership, podcasting, webinars, partnership marketing, and much more, all for HR software companies and consulting firms in the HR space. So you can get all the details at getmorehrclients.com. Now over to our guest. I'm delighted to be joined today by Donny Phillips. Donny is the Director of Partnerships at the very cool company Volt Verify. Now, Volt Verify, they provide employers with an industry-leading no-cost model that gives HR departments the fastest ROI from processing verification of income and employment requests, which lets those HR departments save time on admin, eliminate inbound verification calls, and limit unnecessary employer data exposure. We'll dive all into that in a second, but firstly, Donny, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. Very excited for the conversation today. Looking forward to getting into this discussion a bit further with you.
Brilliant. And if you're listening to this on the go, Donny has a guitar behind him. So I don't know, maybe he'll break out some Hotel California for us a little bit later on. We'll find out.
There's a chance. You never know, Ben.
Yeah, no pressure, Donny. All right. Talking about Volt Verify, and you have some really interesting things, but a big focus is around the protection of data. And I think we all know that that is hugely important, but it's becoming way more important with hacking and cyber attacks and phishing and all this sort of stuff. So tell us, what does Volt Verify do?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. As you mentioned, our core focus in our business model is automating employment and income verifications. There's a whole slew of organizations that do that same process. We think we've built the better model around how we actually engage the data that's necessary to automate the process. And so at the highest level, what we do, Ben, is we try to avoid engaging data. We're not acquiring and gathering sensitive employment information and sensitive income data until it's necessary, and we do so one employee record at a time, which is very different from kind of the industry standard. Every HR tech, HR vendor that we've engaged with has a much larger model around data engagement in which they're acquiring employee records for every employee, typically every pay period for an organization, whether they need it or not. And we know every 2 weeks, we only need a fraction of those employees' information. So there's no reason for us to gather, say, 10,000 employee records every 2 weeks when we might need to actually engage 50 or 60 of them during that same time frame.
So if you take a typical white-collar workforce where the pays typically don't change month to month to set hourly rate or a monthly rate, unless there's annual bonuses involved or a salary change, as you say, the vast majority of that data is not going to change at all. And you're saying, well, that gets sent every month and other providers will just take all that data and then who knows what happens to it or how it's protected, whereas you're just taking the pieces that change or are required. Is that right?
It's pretty close, Ben. So when we think about those other vendors, that model that they're gathering the employee records, they're getting highly detailed information, number of hours worked, the types of pay categories that are paid out on that pay period. They're putting it in their database and storing it in the event they may need it. So they aggregate it, they store it perpetually. Our model is, I'm not going to engage Ben's employment and income data until we have a valid request that we've certified as being valid. And at that point in time, then we'll come gather your relevant information in real time and deliver it back to that requester. The other cool thing here is we don't store that data perpetually. Your income and employment data is only stored for about 90 days. It's a configurable number. I've never had a customer change it, but at 90 days, we strip all the PII out, no longer retain that data. It's a very cool, very differentiated model.
So I was saying there in the intro that it saves time on admin work, eliminates the inbound verification calls, and eliminates unnecessary employee data exposure. Can you tell us about the inbound verification side of things? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we would stake this claim regardless of an employer's current model. So there's really two ways employers are handling this process today. Some employers are still handling this internally. They have their staff dealing with these inbound calls from financial institutes, property managers, government agencies asking to confirm someone works there, to confirm their income amount. So that one's kind of easy to talk against, that, we can outsource that whole process and get your staff out of managing those tasks. They don't bring value to your organization. It's more of an employee benefit, and we can simplify it, take it completely off your plate. That's one model. The other model, Ben, is that maybe they've already outsourced and they're using one of our competitors. Now, as I mentioned, those organizations we compete against use this, what we would say is a mass data integration. So again, they're pulling records every pay period and storing them. When you step back and think about it, if it's an organization that's on a biweekly pay period, they're only getting updated information every 2 weeks. On average, during that span of 2 weeks, that data is 8 days old when they're delivering those reports. Again, just on average. We pull in real time. Our data is always up to the second current for an employee. So the big difference is if an organization's using that mass data model, a verifier reaches out to confirm your employment as of today, your income as of today, but they get a report that says it's current as of May 30th, they'll probably call the HR department and say, hey, I've got this report here that says that this is Ben's title, this is his income as of May 30th, but I need to know, is he still there today? What's his title today? What's his income today? We eliminate those follow-up calls because, again, we're providing data in real time directly from your employer's HR platform.
Nice. So part of the challenge, I'm guessing, for any firm, but for Vault Verify, is that if an employer is already using a provider or they're just doing it internally, manually, and so on, that there's that inertia or that change cost for them. What are your sort of main messages around those aspects?
Yeah, and we actually welcome those questions as well, Ben, because surprisingly, even though I would say very confidently and passionately that we have the best integration model, we have the most advanced integration model in the industry, we're also the easiest to implement. We've built out a really fantastic implementation model where we do all the heavy lifting. On average, for most HR payroll platforms, it takes us about 30 calendar days from kickoff meeting to go live. As I mentioned, we do virtually all the heavy lifting. We ask an employer to invest typically 3 to 5 hours of time over the course of that 30 days. Most of their investment is going to be validating how we configure their program, make sure we're mapping the earnings codes to display correctly on the reports. So again, 3 to 5 hours of primarily validation work on the employer's part. So we actually welcome the conversation because at the end of the day, it's a pretty light lift for the employer, pretty painless. And honestly, most of our testimonial and client feedback is centered around the ease of implementation, because the next thing is once we're set up, we're fully outsourced compared to some of our competitors that maybe aren't because of follow-up issues. Most of an employers, what they recall about working with us, you're so easy to set up, and then I don't ever have to deal with it again.
That must make you sad, not hearing from them again. What are the follow-up issues that maybe some of the other providers burden the HR teams with?
I love that question as well. So in addition to, those follow-up calls, just based on maybe stale data, there's some other things that are very prevalent that we encounter when we have conversations. And oftentimes, Ben, the employer we're talking to doesn't even recognize they have a pain because it's just the way it's always been. They think we're fine. It runs the way we've expected it to. But in addition to those manual follow-up calls, some of the other things that occur is on that mass file model, that integration breaks. And what I mean by that is if they make an acquisition and they bring on a new population that has a different type of earning category, new earnings codes that haven't been recognized by their vendor, those will error out because the vendor hasn't mapped them. That file, the whole file will break. Often what happens is it'll be 2, 3, 4 pay cycles before the vendor says, oh, we have an issue. These aren't loading. They'll reach out to the employer and say, the files have errored out. We need to correct it. That usually necessitates HRIS involvement to help correct the files, regenerate the ones that have been lost. It can often be pretty daunting, and it's very common that happens for those mass file-based integrations. So that's kind of one of the unrecognized pain points because often HR will pass it to the IT team. And then the other thing is, I would say a lack of transparency comes up quite often where employees can't see how their data has been shared out with third parties, or maybe there's requests that they're not comfortable that the employee actually gave consent. Those are kind of common follow-up points. And then in the US, the data privacy legislation has been expanding over the last 6 or 8 years pretty rapidly. With that comes a lot of compliance questions from an employer. So if we're sharing data with an organization that also happens to be a registered data broker, what does that mean for us as the employer organization, our compliance obligations? A lot of questions around that. We take pride in the fact that we're not a registered data broker. We use the data to fulfill this one task on behalf of employers.
Can you clarify that? Because I think that's an important issue, because I've seen this. It's like the Facebook model, Facebook, it's free. Come and use Facebook. But then all of your data's there and everything, every band you've ever listened to and every favorite color you've ever liked, they know inside out. And so that data is then shared and used for advertising. So the data brokers on this side of things in the workplace is a concern, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The example you just gave with the advertising purposes, I can't say it's one-to-one exactly like that, but there's some similar activities that happen. Again, thinking about the couple of largest providers in the space that we occupy, they're credit reporting agencies. With that, they look for what I might refer to as expanded use of the employee data. I will put the disclaimer, I'm not claiming they're doing anything illegal. They've certainly crossed their T's and dotted their I's, but I think it's probably done so with maybe a little less clarity around it. So some examples of where we're different just in the use of data. Our privacy pledge is that we only share the information with employee consent. So we make the verifier prove to us that they have the consent from the employee. That may mean that they upload a signed release form from the employee. We confirm that it's valid and legitimate before we ever release the data. But I would say the bigger difference is how we restrict the types of organizations or types of entities that we permit to use our platform from a requester perspective. So we're very limited. We only approve financial institutes and government agencies. That's it. If you were to look at some of our competitors' privacy statements, you will see organizations such as advertising networks, data brokers, social networks, parties to litigation, retail merchants. There's a whole litany of types of requesters that we don't believe an employer would approve if they were given the opportunity to check yes or no on each of those.
I'm thinking back to when I was a junior HR guy and you'd get requests in from a landlord. Does so-and-so have a job there and how much are they getting paid to approve whether they get an apartment or not? So you just described two categories, government and financial institution. A landlord does not fit into that, right?
Yeah, I think we would consider the landlord to fall into the financial institution because ultimately they're making a decision on credit worthiness.
Right.
So when we say financial institution, we do want to be clear and transparent here. It's banks, it's mortgage companies, it's auto lenders, property managers are certainly in the fold there. But again, yes, legitimate property managers, and we still do require them to have that consent from the employee. So that's one of the forms that individual signed off on when they applied for that property lease or that apartment.
The streamlined admin bit is very refreshing, and the onboarding part, which is 3 to 5 hours, it's a huge benefit, I think, for an HR department. It takes a lot of those stress away. But I do think over time, privacy legislation state by state will only get more complicated, I think, and then you're going to get fines or increasing and stuff like that. So I do think that compliance, that you must have the form uploaded and so on to prove that the employee said yes to this. I think that's going to protect businesses, employers from headaches down the track that maybe that law's not in place yet. But I think that will come back to bite some people. So I really like that approach you're taking there.
Yeah, and on that note, just to go maybe a little bit left field here, Ben, California has instituted the strictest privacy legislation here in the U.S. to date. One of the things I find to be interesting, I guess is the term I'll use, is some of our largest competitors have obtained exemption from the CPRA regulation.
Wow.
As their exemption is based on the fact that they are managing data under the oversight of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. FCRA, regulated data use, has gotten them the exemption from CPRA. Now, we are fully compliant with FCRA, but we actually support the California Privacy Rights Act. We believe it's good legislation. We have not sought, nor do we intend to seek, exemption from that oversight or the obligations of such. And I think the key point on that is when the employers work with us, we take on the risk, we take on the liability, we take on the obligations to handle that data appropriately. They're working with an organization who is exempt, who ultimately holds the bag when it comes to being compliant. We think it's being passed back to the employers.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So setting the standard early and high, I think that's important. So if you guys are not new, but newer to the field, and there's some big players in this area, what are you doing to get the word out there about the business and let employers know about Vault Verify? What kind of marketing approaches are you taking?
Yeah, so this is one example, Ben. We're trying to lean in on doing more of a knowledge share, educational type of content, because we believe that once the masses begin to understand that there are better models for integration, there are better models for handling data, the sales, the pipeline, the growth, the demand generation will follow that. So our approach here is to try to educate the HR community, educate the employers. And the way we're doing that is by participating in things like this. We're trying to do podcasts within the HR community, setting up webinars, leveraging different industry associations, participating in industry events. So again, we're trying to not deliver sales meetings to start. We just want to make sure employers are aware that there is a better model out here. And what you feel like an appropriate business or acceptable service levels may not quite be. Maybe what you're experiencing is broken. You may not recognize that yet. That's where we're starting today.
Nice. I've trust different businesses where they're all about inbound. We're sharing thought leadership and writing stuff and saying stuff. And then you have others where it's all outbound. And for me, I think a balance is kind of good. Would that be the same for you guys? Are you doing a bit of account-based marketing and getting the word out there as well as the thought leadership?
Yeah, we're definitely doing some direct campaigns. Again, I think our approach is still to try to do those even in a thoughtful manner where it's, have you considered there are some of these data engagement risks that you may be experiencing today? We'll probably drive those types of questions or those types of thoughts out to those organizations that we know are outsourced. For the in-sourced model, similar approach, but we'll talk about the fact that what you're doing today, if you're managing this, is not bringing strategic value to your organization. And we may also raise some questions around how are you validating the folks that are requesting the data? How are you reporting that out? How are you tracking that? Because we bring all of that to the table at no cost for you as an employer. The third angle that we're taking here is we have leaned very heavily into the partner model. So we've expanded our partner network out to a couple dozen partners today. Around half of those are solution providers of some sort, where our real-time, transparent, and easy to implement integration can be used to power their services as well. So we're also leveraging that network for cross-sell within those organizations and to actually help them bring on new business as well.
Yeah, very smart. Yeah, a number of HR technology firms, that's a great way to team up, connect up, promote through the back end or in various methods. You guys do some great thought leadership. I've seen you've got from time to time webinars where you're educating, because I think that's your key point is you're educating, not trying to have sales down their throat. It's telling the market that there are different ways, better ways of doing it. So how are you leveraging those webinars?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've really tried to focus on this year, Ben, is to set up webinars where continuing education credits may be available. So we've got a couple. They're not carved in stone yet enough to share the details today, but we've got one that's penciled in for mid-August right now, where there'll be SHRM, continuing education credits available. So there's some incentive for the employer to participate or those HR reps to participate to get those continuing education credits. But then we're selfishly and confidently thinking, yeah, you're going to get those continuing education credits, but really what you're going to get is some new information that you may not be aware of today.
And for people listening who may not be aware of that approach, how did you get the SHRM credits?
So what we've done so far was actually working with other accredited organizations, because we don't have a model directly at Vault where we can make sure you get those continuing education credits, but either working directly with SHRM, the organization we're working with right now is an HR consulting group that has the ability to deliver those SHRM credits.
That's clever. Okay. So there's that partnership model again in a different form.
Absolutely.
And so for people listening to this, who would be your ideal customers, clients?
Our focus is any organization that has more than 1,000 active employees in the US and Canada. And that's just based on the fact that we don't charge for the implementation. We take on that work. So there's kind of a model here where it's like, if you get less than 1,000, it starts to become questionable on how long it takes us to recoup that investment. Now, having said that, we will go below 1,000 depending on the HR platform, because like I said, we've got really simple. We've got a couple that are super duper simple where we'll go down to, 500-600 employees. That's not really our target audience. So again, where we're really putting our marketing efforts and true focus is north of 5,000 active employees. And I'll say we've seen rapid growth in the last 18 months, actually, in what we would say enterprise accounts, north of 30,000 active employees. So I give you a long-winded way to say we're industry agnostic. We're not really too concerned with employee size once you're north of 1,000. And the other thing that's really cool, this is pretty new for us, Ben, is we've rolled out some new solutions as well. So for nonprofit organizations that may be dealing with pains around public service loan forgiveness related to student loans, we've set up a model to really streamline that process for those organizations. We have recently rolled out a fully customizable employment letter program that helps the HR communities within our organizations to truly build from the ground up custom employment letters for various purposes.
Donny, where were you when I had to write all those letters?
We were probably thinking of all this stuff, Ben. We just weren't ready to deploy it yet. So what would be a use case on the custom letters? A good one is for an organization that has a lot of travelers, international travelers. When they want to go through the global entry process, that employee, they have to have that proof of employment in hand. You can just craft that employment letter specific to that use case and make it available to the employee to self-serve whenever they need it. And the other thing, the newest thing that we've rolled out is we're actually offering international employment verifications now. So that's really new for us. It just rolled out here in April. We're really excited for it, and it brings a lot of power to the equation that we don't think some of our competitors make available today.
Yeah, it certainly opened up some new angles, some new markets, I would think.
Yes, for sure.
If I start to wrap up then and ask for your advice for other HR-related businesses on best ways to either market or grow their business, what would you share with them?
So I think I would go back to the partner networking. I think there's just a golden opportunity there, especially when you find partners that have shared business philosophies. Like we find organizations that are focused on doing the right thing with employee data, focused on being transparent with how they're doing things, focused on delivering a high quality, high level of service to an organization. And then you start to suss out how can we leverage one another to make it successful from both angles. I think that's a key angle. The other thing, just based on, I'm about 3 decades in this HR outsource space. If I've learned anything, it is that knowledge share, education, that's probably the best way to start getting the word out. By and large, HR folks don't want to be sold to. Coming at them from a sales perspective is off-putting in many instances. So the better way is to educate and let them know how you solve pains that maybe they don't recognize today.
That's great advice. So just to finish then, if someone listening to this wants to become a customer, or they think they know a customer, or they want to learn more about the business, what should they do next?
I would say the easy starting point is to hit our website, which is simply vaultverify.com. There's multiple links on there to, express interest, to contact us. If you click on the partner page, and my contact information is available there. So just reach out to us. And again, I would say if you're on the fence about making that outreach, know that we're not an organization that's going to try to make a high-pressured sales conversation. We'll always have a discussion. If the stars don't align, we're still happy to have that knowledge share available out to those organizations.
Nice. Okay, great. That is vaultverify.com. You'll have the link in the show notes. And if you do become a customer, I'll get Donny to promise right here, right now, that he will play Hotel California for you. So you heard it here first.
Yeah, some version. It might just be me pressing play on a stereo.
It might be a karaoke version. That's okay. Very good. Thanks very much for sharing what you guys are doing. I love the fresh new approach you've taken to it, and the huge focus on privacy, because that's just going to get bigger and bigger for sure. And thank you also for sharing your business growth advice. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure this morning, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.